Hello and welcome. This is a video for Square Syllables regarding feedback for Koth Square Sill A7. It's intended to just give a semi-formal presentation of my opinion and thoughts on the map design and how it can be adjusted, but I want to preface all of this by saying it's completely opinionated. I don't think you should make drastic changes based off singular opinions, but I do think part of a map maker's job is to interpret a lot of those opinions and feedback to design a solution. I'll try to be specific, but I just really want to highlight the idea that as a map maker, you're free to pick and choose any of the points you like and discard those you disagree with. All right, so let's start how everything starts out, the rollout. Um, so as another point of note here, I'm going to make a lot of comparisons and suggestions to how other Koth maps do things, and that's because it's my only point of comparison. Don't feel the need to copy these other maps if you have your own vision or idea that you want to work with. So as a baseline, we do have three maps to work with that are in the rotation, for RGL at least: Product, Clearcut, and Bagel. On the rollout for each of these maps, I would say there's a distinct pattern that at the start of the mid fights, once they've arrived to mid, you have the combo central. So that's your demo, your pocket scout, and your medic, and kind of your other scout too-ish. And then soldiers on the opposite sides. So if you have one soldier on the left, you have one soldier on the right. So as part of the rollout, I think we should first think, how does the soldier left go? How does the soldier right go? All right, so I did just mention soldiers go left and right, but there is kind of this window route, and it seems to be egging you on, like, hey, jump through me. Um, let's put a pin in that and start with the left side, because there's a really appealing ramp slide right there. So I would expect one soldier to jump off this wall, ramp slide, probably spend another rocket to ramp slide off this, and then two rockets 300 buff at the start, so you're arriving at mid fine, and you just walk down here, and then you probably rocket jump, or you just spam rockets, or you can waddle a little bit. Either way, you're into the mid, and that's a really clean, nice, fun rollout. I think the ramps always make things fun. As for the right side, I think this choke here is going to be really tight and awkward to work around. And if you look here, coming out this right side, it actually seems like you go a little bit further. I'm going to go a little bit bird's eye here. It seems like the straight line from mid may be even faster than rotating there to the right. So the problem here, I would say, is if you're jumping off this wall, I think that when I tested it, you jump and you jump off this surface and you can kind of land here. It doesn't really get you that much more than I think just like jumping off the ground and skipping here. If anything, I think it's kind of more awkward, probably easier to mess up. And down here, you can even get retapped by your medic before you like curve off to the right. Because what I would expect is your scouts and your medic to kind of run main here and then run main and central like that. So I think suggestion-wise, I think the window might be a little bit of a misleader, but it's not really an issue. As for demo rollout, I would expect demo to either roll out left or kind of main. He wants to end up in the main, but again, ramp slides are cool. You could do a sticky off this, second sticky, jump off this, probably grab something like this pack if you are weak. And like I said, your scouts are here, you're reconnected with them, charge your sticky and walk up. Otherwise, I think it's probably be fine to just throw a sticky and just do a jump like that. It kind of seems the same to me. Um, I think if I did want to go main, probably this route, the second one suggested, is kind of faster. But yeah, on the rollout side of things, it does seem kind of clean, fast. I really like how you can get your combo on both soldiers kind of like to the sides pretty effectively. And that's just what I would expect. I don't know if that's actually how it would play out, but at least in my mind, that's kind of like the vision I have. All right, so let's take a second to turn around and kind of look at these chokes. Because I want to talk about forward holding. And this is going to get really confusing, but this is probably what I'd call forward holding. So there's aggressive holding on point, but this is kind of like the forward hold where you lock them out at their first kind of like 3 choke. So the map that would do this would be like Product, right? Infamous forward hold. And all of these doorways and archways are kind of like large, and the routes are really distinct and spread apart. And there's not a lot of good high ground to kind of like watch over them, at least not that's very good or not like spammable. And a route like this, there's even the uncomfortability of a shutter from spawn, so I could even get sniped out of spawn if I'm trying to do something funny here as a demo. So I think there's no real forward hold potential here. I don't think that's a bad thing. Clearcut is a map that people have tried really hard to make a forward hold work, but I don't think there's any popular ones, or any that people really think works. So just a note. So let's move on, and let's say we went to our mid, and unfortunately we wiped, and now we're looking at getting into mid. So what is our options for getting into mid, and what do our rotations kind of look like? And I'm going to go left and kind of like sweep right. So if we look at this left building, there's a shutter, there's also this ramp up. If we come up to this ramp, they're going to need to have someone a little bit close to have vision on us, but if we do drop down, we kind of have a hallway-ish. It's a little bit of a tight corridor. That I would expect a player to kind of like lock this out. I'm going to get rid of my statues real quick. I want to talk about that later. But This route seems okay. Just as a normal, simple route, it feels like it would get locked out by a splash class. This lower route, it's a little reminiscent of Clear Cut's sort of Valley to me, where I might want to take an exchange like this. Like, oh, both teams have Uber. We're kind of unable to get into the point. Let's take an Uber through lower. So we try to walk in, probably try to milk as far as we can. And I would kind of expect to be able to walk up this ramp, but really we're trying to get on point and use. This is really trying to get as deep as possible before using, so we can kind of exchange and off that space get the rest of our team in. This, I think, is really good. Having a rotation route that's clean to the other ones is really, really helpful for being able to poke and prod each side to try to get in. I'll comment a little bit about the drop down later, I think, but let's just keep moving a little bit to the right. So rotating to the right, I think this rotation is a little bit far forward. I feel awkward kind of like rotating back because I don't think I'd want to pressure this without vision, so we'd probably want to pressure it from that way. But uh, there's a window which I'll also comment about later. I think what I probably might suggest is for this door here to be moved a little bit further away, kind of like to the left here. And I'm going to comment a little bit more about the valley, but I think this kind of wide archway should probably be inverted. So where you have the space, there should be a wall. And in this black pillar, I'd probably cut it in half and make it so that the right of it is kind of the left of it is cut out and the right of it is kind of solid. So you kind of have like a little object to work around here, and then if you want to back out, you kind of back out here through this wall. And then for the right side, I'll go into a little bit of detail about this later, but I essentially think this should be kind of like a more open route, something a little bit similar to a valley. So let me go back and talk about both those points before. I'm going to start with the kind of window here. And this is, I'm not really sure if this is controversial, but personally, I am not a huge fan of this. I think what you have here essentially is an area where Scout can play. You can just jump back and forth, or it doesn't really need to jump. You can just stand here. And he has free vision. And I think there is a lot of like clamoring about wanting free vision, especially like I can't see where the enemies are coming from. But I think that free vision reduces complexity. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit about this. But essentially, I think part of the complexity of sixes is having to spot for vision, working with incomplete information, trying to figure out where each one of those classes is, right? Because if their demos, instead of being on the right, he's on the left, then the right side doesn't have traps, maybe we can bust that side. But this essentially means I can spot all their players for free with no risk to myself. There's another small issue, it's not really an issue, but it's just a thing you can do over here. If you were a soldier, you could jump up, and from here you could spot everything. I think the only other Koth map I can think that has anything similar to this would be probably Product, where you could jump in your spawn and you can see if the enemy team is kind of forward holding on you. Um, I'm not sure, like, it's not really a thing to like or dislike, but I personally think that it doesn't feel like kind of like normal. If you can have like spotting vision from other routes that aren't free that you can kind of risk and like peek lower areas, that would be a much better fix. I'm not really sure how I do that. Probably again, I'd put a lot of it on this right side rework, this kind of valley idea I was talking about. Um, so let's see. Okay, the drop down. So you never really would bring your combo here. There's a lot of tight walls. Your medic would never be able to surf anything. And it doesn't really get you in closer to the point like this lower route kind of does, or I think should. So I think this is really just kind of like exist as a route for a player to get in and then try to like bomb out. So kind of like sack route. I think especially if someone is spotting this, there's no real way to get to that drop down free. So I think it's very unusual. If anything, I would say it feels uncomfortable that this route only exists for the drop down. Like the high ground kind of only exists for the drop down. It does help the team that doesn't have the point help gain control of this room. But I would probably like I'm thinking the closest analogy to this would be Clear Cut on its left side, where you kind of have a high ground ramp, but that also connects into the main. So I'm not really sure if you could add more doorways or if you want to add more doorways, but I do think this drop down feels a little bit awkward. All right, so I just have one last thing I want to talk about before we get to the mid. I think it's a little bit about the style of this map, and I know I sound like I'm being way too picky, and it definitely is way too picky, but I think the whole map has a kind of uncanny feel to it. I think some people say it's kind of like it feels. This sounds rude, but it does kind of feel like a first map. And if I had to put my finger on it, I'd say the reason I feel so uncomfortable is a collision of kind of like textures. So I think this point kind of like emphasized it for me, where I'm like, okay, I have a wood texture cutting into a red, orange, blue kind of like dev texture, and you have some very detailed props and surfaces, and they kind of like collide awkwardly with the dev texture. I'm not really sure if I have good advice for this beyond I think that you should be very cautious with kind of use of props, maybe use just dev textures instead, and then try not to texture too many surfaces, just because the transition is probably going to feel jarring to a lot of players when you have kind of areas like this. But okay, enough about being picky, right? Let's talk about a little bit of holding positions. Like I said, we lost the mid. We're trying to bust back in. What are we fighting against, right? I would expect, and this is just off the top of my head, I have no idea if this is how I'd play, but it'd just be kind of like some of my instincts. And I would expect something a little bit like, I'm going to put two demos down because it's going to be a rotation, a little bit something like this. And basically from either this free vision or this free vision, I have spotting over your combo. So your meta can't really rotate left or right without the person in the window seeing everything, right? And that means your demo can always lock out the enemy medic. He's going to be rotating back and forth, either trapping those two or trapping these two. This scout, I would expect to rotate kind of like seeing vision here, because there's no risk for him here. There's nothing that can get close to him. You can see both of those. And then if he needs to, back out because the demo's rotated that way, he can watch the two from high ground like this. It's very difficult to sack into two players like this. So where does your team come in from? So I just mentioned earlier that we just wiped on mid. We're full disad. Let's say the fight went on for quite a while. So we're going to send a 4-man. That's a pretty common idea. We're going to send everyone except for our pocket scout and medic. They're going to just try to jump in and try to force or kill the medic or kill as many other players as possible. But how does our 4-man get in? So how do the other maps do it, I guess? So both Product and Clearcut kind of have objects you can jump over, right? And that would be kind of, I think, if you took where this metal sheet is and you just kind of like completely busted it open and you could like jump over it. I am not a huge fan of that. I don't think the geometry of the map is kind of built with that in mind. It would feel a little bit awkward. So what does the third map do? I think my understanding of how Bagel works is like I said, you're having the demo over here, and what you could have is a third route, and I think Bagel has kind of a large, I think they call it his garage, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a large door that the team can kind of start to try to dry push from, and this soldier can't really hold it by himself. Right now, this soldier has a really nice kind of like splash surface to work with, and heck, the other soldier can even support him. I think this could be busted open to be more of a valley kind of thing. A lot more space to work with, much wider. I'm thinking a little bit like Badlands. But I think off that you'd have a lot of space to work off, and it'd be much harder for a team to kind of like hold you at the chokes if you had a larger surface here. At least your demo can't walk out like an entire slope. But yeah, that's just kind of like a suggestion. Let's see. Let's finally talk about the mid, right? About this holding position stuff. So if we look at this left route here, oh no, he's going back. There's a shutter, and initially I was like, why is this shutter here? And I think I pinned it to this sightline probably, because this is quite a scary sightline. With the shutter open, it'd be even longer. And I think there's a way to fix the sightline and also kind of improve the geometry of the mid. And what I would suggest is this blue wall. Actually, both these walls are blue now I think about it. But I think this wall could be extended. So you could have a sort of object. It doesn't really matter what, but size-wise, I would suggest roughly maybe like a crate on Metalworks that comes out of the wall and kind of comes into the mid. It'd be really cool if you created like some 45s on that. But essentially, you have a block here that serves as a block for the sightline, and it also serves as ground for players to play off. Because right now, one of the biggest kind of like instinctual things, and this is just because I've had soldier on the mind, is there's nowhere to land as a soldier. I think these are areas players are already playing. You have scouts watching over this space. I'm a soldier. I'm high bombing, and where do I land? It's a committal bomb. I'm just bombing and dying. There's no ground I can really play for. You think clear cut, there's like very obvious kind of like tall sheds where soldiers can land here. They can fight for this ground. If they win the ground, they can like start shooting down on things. And that also means scouts are kind of important in controlling that ground. Right here, there's a lot of the same elevation, and there's elevation over it that is really for scouts, and I would say not really for soldiers. So I think that would kind of help a lot towards that point. Besides that, I think one of the notes that I kind of had was this lower area feels incredibly awkward to me. I'm not really sure I'm a huge fan of it. I guess my thought is this map is so wide that it'd be really difficult for someone to even get there unspotted. And if they did get there, there's really no purpose to it. There's no way to like really wrap behind cleanly. A team will just play away from it, and you won't get anything. And I also think, as a small note, a lot of Koth maps work off directing players to the mid, right? You think Product and Clearcut both kind of funnel you in. You have to go from the mid, and then once you're at the mid, it kind of expands into other options. This kind of takes away from it. It detracts from it. It gives you another route to kind of like bypass it. Not a huge fan of it. Besides that, I do have a note here that these walls, I kind of initially I thought, okay, demo spams here, and then he rotates and he spams the left. But why does this middle route exist? And you can kind of see this space, at least this geometry, it feels incredibly awkward just for me instinctually. I would be a fan of just kind of like putting a wall where that middle is, maybe putting a little tiny bit of cover up top. So basically turn these two walls into one in the middle of them. And I think that would be a lot more comfortable to play around and kind of like to deal with. I also think you can maybe work with the ramp geometry off that. Because like I said, coming in from the lower here, I feel like I should be able to have space or like a ramp so that I can come up kind of quick. But okay. Last thing I kind of have to note is packs. So we're going to go back. He's going back again. And talk about packs and kind of like this what do you call it? It's not quite a lobby, but kind of like a forward area or backwards area. I think these small packs, or rather small health, medium ammo, they don't really feel like they need to belong. I would probably just get rid of them completely. As for this medium small, I think this could be centralized. Right now, I think these two packs are a little close together, and I know that seems awkward because, you know, Clear Cut and Product both have two packs and kind of like their thing, but I think this pack could probably be centralized. I'd probably put in the middle there, or to help the demo roll out, if you're going from the left, just on the left there. Either way, this door would be moved and there'd be a pack on either side of it, probably the right side. Because I think the second pack here, I'd suggest moving it a little bit into lobby. That way you have to at least deal with, oh no, I'm low, I'm going to back out, I'm going to grab this health pack, and then I have to commit out through a choke again. It kind of helps with being able to push off a player being down. Uh, and also not making this person feel like they need to walk all the way back for a pack, because this feels very, very long. And the other thing I note is I am not a huge fan of this medium pack on mid. I feel like the worst way to use packs is probably in an area where they would disturb combat. Like maybe in pubs it's fun to like grab a pack on a fight that you would have lost, but I think in competitive, when you have a pack in combat, it feels incredibly unfulfilling to do a ton of damage and then have a player able to just grab a pack and that to be not worth anything. Um, Makes it really difficult to kind of like follow up on damage and make a push, especially because if I'm kind of like holding you in these chokes, I technically have two medium health packs to work off. It's a little bit too much health, I think. So I would probably do away with them altogether. Um, the packs and the ammo kind of on the floor. And I can't explain what I'll put there instead, but if you do kind of extend the structure out, I might suggest smalls on both sides. I feel like that's not probably too overpowered. Little smalls kind of like to the front side. So you have like a wall here, and then smalls against it, and you have a wall here, and smalls against it as well. Like small health, medium ammo, or small health, small ammo. Up to you. Um, as for like what I do with the empty space, I did kind of mention I would probably slide this ramp over. And if you're not a huge fan of that small ammo, maybe put the small ammo down there instead. That kind of makes your point a little bit less symmetric. Because as it is now, it is very kind of like straight on. It's symmetric in a way that I think feels a little bit awkward or uncanny. And there's nothing wrong with kind of like sliding the ramp over and putting health, and then sliding this ramp over and putting health. It's still symmetrical on both sides, but it doesn't feel as centralized, I guess. Anyway, I think that concludes all my notes on the map. I'm going to cut this video before it gets any longer, but thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.